Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We have a great session lined up for you today. Before we get started, there are just a few general housekeeping points to cover. First and foremost, please use the online question tool to post any questions that you have, and we will share them with our speakers. Second, if you experience any technical difficulties today, please use the same question tool, and a member of our admin team will be on hand to support you. And finally, just to know, this session is being recorded, and we'll be sharing a copy of the recording with you via email in the coming days. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our speakers to get us started.
Great, thank you. And welcome everyone to today's presentation. Today, we are going to talk about tricks of a trade. It's always great to find out about use cases, about personal experiences, and hopefully apply them to your particular space of work. So today's focus of the tricks of the trade will be tech implementation strategy case study. And with me today, we've got amazing speaker, fantastic and knowledgeable legal ops director at Content Square, and also an extremely pleasant personality, Jeremy Hopkins. But before I hand over to my esteemed co-speaker, I wanted to say a brief word about myself. Why am I here and why am I speaking with you today? So my background is in legal. I started my brief legal career at Clifford Chance, but I soon realized that there should be a different way to handling contracts, legal documents and processes. And I quickly moved into legal technology space. And for the nearly last decade, I've been helping out different companies and law firms to get on board with legal technology and help them implement it. And I do it together with Wolters Kluwer, who is supporting multiple companies with their various technologies. And over to you, Jeremy. Welcome.
Thank you, Margo. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Margo set the bar quite high. I'll do my best to be amazing, but at least if I can just talk a bit of sense, I think I'll have done well. I'm Jeremy Hopkins. I'm Director of Legal Operations at a company called Content Square. We're a software company providing digital experience analytics, which is basically software tools that enable organizations to optimize user experiences on their website and on their apps. I've been at Content Square for 2 years. It's a company fast growing. We have about 2,000 employees. I think 2 years ago when I joined, it was about 750. Our legal and compliance team is around 50, of whom about 30 or so are legal, the rest are cyber security and privacy. My background, I've been in legal services for a very long time, 25, 30 years. I'm not a lawyer, I've never been a lawyer, so I've always been working with lawyers around service delivery process and more recently technology. And about the last 10 years or so, I've been doing in some form or another what is described as legal operations, both within in-house teams, law firms, alternative providers, and technology businesses.
Brilliant, thank you. And just a few words about Wolters Kluwer, because this is how we got into this place, thanks to Wolters. It's a huge organization that supports thousands of customers across the globe, and with the main focus on legal and regulatory services, which we cover in that space today. But the main product that focuses on helping in-house legal departments throughout the globe is Legisway. Legisway is a contract lifecycle management platform that allows users to utilize various processes and handle various processes from the beginning, from blank page to signed agreements and storing and searching through a database of different contracts. So if you have never experienced working in CLM with a CLM or any AI for contract review, please reach out to us at the end of the show. But with further ado, why the main purpose of the call? Why? Because most of you on the call today here who are lawyers or are helping lawyers would have experienced the main pressure of being in the industry. The pressure is growing day on day, year on year. Simple things such as geopolitical movement, economic movement, aspects of competition that is growing, but also regulations. Some of you have probably never dealt with cybersecurity 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. What's happening now? This is one of the biggest parts in the liability claims and as part of the contractual layout and information security checks. But the main purpose, the main point here is there is a high pressure there. And this probably exemplifies it so well, because for those who are here with us and have not been close to lawyers, we have this great imagination of how lawyers' life should be, the TV lawyer, so-called. But reality is completely different. And I see this day, every single day, speaking with different prospects and clients of growing number of contracts, growing complexity in those contracts, different clauses, different risks and liabilities that hasn't been there before. And the main top challenges that we see that do not add to lowering the pressure is the managing of the demand on corporate legal departments from the business itself, as well as the way how to improve legal operations without the particular headcount that is one of the biggest struggles for corporate legal departments. And also another way to express it and the pressure, I think there is this great saying by Bob Ambrosi. For those who don't know him, he's the thought leader in the space and speaks a lot about it. But I thought he summarized what's happening in the industry quite well with regards to tech adoption. There is no going back. And he quoted, "The toothpaste is out of the tube. No one should bother to squeeze it back in." And almost feels, the legal tech space almost feels like that, because the growing pressure combined, the intensity of what's happening in legal departments, combined with pressure from the organizations and limited finances and headcount, doesn't really help to go any other route than technology. Also, on top of the trends that we hear through conversations, through daily interactions with prospects, clients, individuals in the space, we also decided to create a report, because it's always good to get statistics, and they can be boring, but I think they're extremely also at the same time informative and interesting to see whether this really reflects what's happening in the industry. And based on those benchmark results, we decided with Jeremy to discuss the main topics and main issues that we've seen. And I will show you the statistics, but essentially the transformation that is happening with the use of technology steers around issues such as budget, such as designing digital strategy, and also implementing technology. And that's the place where we will focus on the most today. Right, so just to give a bit of credibility for this survey, it's not that we interviewed 10 people. We actually did a thorough job and looked into over 500 individuals in the profession. Because most of the audience here is from the UK and European based, therefore the statistics apply and are selected for that region. We have good representation of countries such as France, Germany, and the UK, especially in this one. But also what's interesting on the right-hand side donut is that personnel within legal teams that has been taking part in this survey represents over half of those answering the questionnaire is between 1 and 5 only. And I'm not sure what is your particular experience, but this is what I see quite a lot, even for large organizations, large corporations. The legal teams tend to be quite small and underrepresented, with additional pressure on lowering headcount or not increasing it with additional finances. Hence, legal technology could potentially be helpful. And I promise, I think this is the last statistics, but this is what we are going to base our discussion on. And it's always good to know where those discussions come from, because they don't come from thin air. They actually come from the word that you shared. And the main challenge that we see by far is securing the budget. That is combined with gaining stakeholder buy-in. And it's not surprising to some extent, because businesses and leaders in the business, senior stakeholders, do not want to spend money on things they don't know about, they don't believe in, or they are not familiar with. That's why it should be predominantly on the legal teams or legal ops teams to spread a lot of information internally in order to gain the buy-in from the business and secure the budget. Because if you don't speak out, no one will hear it, and nothing will change. But we will dive a little bit deeper into that. But also another big aspect is implementation and digital technology design, and all those additional aspects are associated with exactly that. Okay, so enough from me of introducing why we are here, why we are doing this. Most importantly, I wanted to hand over to Jeremy with a very big question. How do you go about getting budget for technology? Because this is the top challenge that we've seen in the statistics. This is the top challenge I hear from people that I speak with. Prospects often come to calls with me and say, hey, I'm interested, but I don't have the money, or I don't have the budget, or I don't know how to do it. Therefore, we decided to come in and give you some guidance, some examples. And Jeremy, over to you. How do you convince stakeholders that they should give you some money to help out with building technology stack?
Well, thank you. Two big, difficult questions that get asked a lot, and I'm going to be like a politician here. I will answer them, but I'm going to ask a different question first, because actually it's at the core of all of this. Is actually, what is the purpose and value of your in-house legal team? What is it there to do? What impacts and outputs and value is the business expecting of you? Because that is what you need the technology to support. That's what you're going to be measured on, and that is speaking the language of your business, of your stakeholders, of your execs. If you are looking at defining a piece of technology in terms of how it impacts the legal team, I'm not sure people are going to be that interested, or it's not going to be that impactful. If, for example, you're saying we need a matter management tool, what do you need it for? To manage matters. That's kind of a legal exceptionalist view. Whereas if you were to be saying, the typical answer to that, I would be saying, well, what is a matter? Everyone in the business has tasks and projects. You know, why are you so special? What the hell is so special about legal? So that kind of mindset, which I know exists a lot, is really damaging to having this conversation in the first place. If, on the other hand, you were framing the matter management request as, we want to have the capability of improving our efficiency, measuring our performance so we can challenge ourselves, speed up deals, analyze risk, analyze demand on the legal team so we can see where risk is, improve risk management across the business. These are all business impacts that would justify and warrant investment in technology that you wouldn't get if you're just looking internally in what the legal team do. So for me, the rationale is really, and actually in a way, these are the easier questions, the getting the budget. The harder question is often what is the value, what are you expected to provide, what are the scope of your services. That's a difficult question to have, but once you've got that clear, it's much easier to build a business case that's got visible and meaningful impact, that means something to senior stakeholders. The other element for this conversation, you need credibility to have that conversation, and you haven't got any credibility if you're perceived as inefficient, and backward thinking and inward looking. So to this end, you need to be able to show the business already that you have processes in place, whether or not using technology, but you have some sort of efficiency. You're not just a service center that's just receiving emails and responding. You've got to track something manually. And then the other element is, are you using your enterprise tools well? So if you've got the MS suite, you've got tools like Monday, Asana, ClickUp. If you're using those tools to the best of their capabilities, and saying to a business case, we're already using these, but it doesn't give us this, here's what we need, then you've got a credible conversation. If your conversation is you want a matter management tool, have you tried the Office 365 suite? No. Then straight away it's, well, you've got no, you're not even trying, come back to me when you're ready. And I think that's, again, if you just try to leap for these sort of point legal solutions, that's just gonna give you you're gonna get pretty short shrift, I think, particularly from CFOs, and on the technology side. And then pausing there, sort of straddling this question and going on to the convincing of stakeholders, we've seen on the slide that the issue of growing demands and the inability to increase headcount. So for me, scalability is the absolute sort of key overarching driver for technology. Pretty much every one of us has got an organization that's either looking to grow, or at least the legal workload is growing through the sort of regulatory and the environmental issues that Margo outlined earlier. So there are two things you can do with that. Or you can either not deal with them at all and create a load of risk. You can increase headcount, but no business, never heard anyone in a business say, yay, more lawyers, we want more lawyers. So process and technology is the only way you can enable scalability of a business without scaling up in terms of headcount. So there is no other way of doing it. Less lawyers, no more lawyers as you scale, for me, is the most kind of compelling business case. And again, framing that to senior execs as a means to continue to manage risk, but without growing headcount, is a positive from their perspective, but it's an essential for scalability. And I think the final point I'm just going to make on straddling these two topics is when we're talking about budget, I would suggest there shouldn't be such a thing as a legal tech budget. As a legal function, you're a unit that's there to deliver outputs to a business in a scalable and sustainable way. How you do that is a mixture of people, process, and technology. So if you just had a carved out technology budget, and if I had something like, so let's say 50K taken off my technology budget that I don't have, but if I had that taken away, I would need about 250K of headcount budget to make up for what I think, for example, a CLM does for me. So framing it as a technology budget, maybe you can frame it as a percentage of your overall budget, but the budget is to provide a service to the business. How you provide that is a leadership issue for the legal function. And then finally, on the stakeholder convincing, really why we're here today, what we're talking about, a lot of this is about knowledge and understanding, benchmarking. In-house legal teams, we're all in our own little silos. We're all a bit lonely because we're as a legal team, typically, unlike in private practice, you are battling all the time to show your value, demonstrate what you do. You get real valuable knowledge from having discussions with peers, from looking at benchmarking reports, and being the person in the room who understands what other teams are doing and how they operate, and being able to distill that knowledge credibly internally, again, gives you a great boost in terms of your influence to the business, that what you're looking for is going to provide a meaningful return. So I've given my insider perspective from in-house, but Margo, I'm going to give you the opportunity from a vendor perspective, actually how you can assist with these kind of business case issues.
That's great, and thank you for that. But I think before I go into the vendor perspective, because these are two elements, one being in-house, internally, having the internal influence on the business, and hopefully having an influence, because as you rightly pointed, Jeremy, balancing between investment in technology, securing budget for technology versus securing budget for a headcount. That's also a big differentiation here. You said financially it could have much more impact in order to invest in an additional person, but there are also other aspects that come into it, the personality aspects, managing individuals, a different level of contracting, providing benefits, and so on. So there are also additional aspects that you have to manage, and people management is extremely difficult too. So if you can be helped with a little a little bit from technology, that's already probably a big win. At least I see it personally in my own workspace. I'm not acting as a lawyer anymore. I'm not acting as an assistant to internal legal teams. I'm helping external legal teams, lawyers, to see how they can make it more impactfully, how they can make the implementation of technology smooth, but also to make sure that it really helps them. So as a vendor, in terms of strategies that are being applied, first of all, what I've heard recently is that I don't want to speak from lawyers. I don't want to speak to salespeople from any vendor, because I'm a salesperson from a vendor, speaking from a vendor's perspective. So it's not a great thing to hear, because people are afraid often of, first of all, being pushed anything on them, being pushed quite in an aggressive way by emails, phone calls, LinkedIn messages, different aspects. And that's not a great impression that vendors have done in the past. And I hope it changes slightly now, hearing all that feedback. But I wanted to make sure that everyone on the call today understands that vendors are there to help, because they know how their technology works. I know how the technology that I'm operating in can help in-house legal departments, or if it's AI tool, law firms, because I do personally cover 2 different areas. And this is not an impression that vendors have done a good impression of so far. So I want to reiterate, vendors are there to help, because what's the most important is that I am very up and upfront with people that I speak with in first discovery calls. This is a solution for you, or this is not really a solution for you, or maybe you want to try something else, or maybe I can recommend something else. Because the biggest pain for everyone, and that includes salespeople on the vendor side, is when there is no match and there is a big push to sell, and that's not a great thing to do for anyone, including the sales. So there is a trend I see, and I speak from my own experience and from colleagues in the vendor space who cover different companies, different industries, that we don't want to push something that doesn't fit. So we are there to help and to suggest what may work, what may not work for you. So the first thing I would do as an attempt to strategize the best implementation process is to have half an hour to an hour conversation. And it is by no means binding on anyone's time. But I can share examples of how other people in your similar situation have done it in the past. What has worked, what hasn't worked. I don't believe you as a lawyer or early on legal ops have that level of experience or orientation in the market. So use vendors to exhaust on information, to interrogate on what's happening in the space, how you can be helped. So that's the first thing. Have a conversation. Don't be afraid. Most of vendors will not try to push something that doesn't work on you. I'm quite confident of that. And second thing, I've heard a lot, the tool costs so much money. Some tools do, especially if they're extremely robust and they are trying to sort a lot of different links in the business, not only in legal, but maybe much wider. Yes, they may come with a price tag, but again, evaluate whether this price tag isn't bigger than another person or a group of people, because the bigger, the more robust technology you implement, yes, it's slightly more difficult, slightly more complex, but at the end of the day, financially, it might be much more rewarding. And also as a process, it's going to be much more simplified. So just to come back to the implementation, the first thing I would start with is that discovery call, just to make sure that we have a match. If there is a match, we will discuss different points of solution. Solution of Legisway, for example, is built of different modules. I'm not going to push all the modules into someone who is not, for example, I'm not going to push real estate module or litigation module to someone who is only dealing with basic contracts. So there is this conversation, this fit and understanding of the business that has to happen first. So please be patient and answer questions, because that helps vendors understand. But once we have the understanding, we can help better. And then the implementation process is a collaboration with one individual in the team, dedicated person, or a group of individuals from your own business, and with a person dedicated from a vendor side. That is a constant collaboration on a fuller understanding of the business and how it fits in the processes, and designing the tool and integrations of the tool directly into your own space. So there is a lot of conversation. There are some meetings that have to happen. There are certain aspects of trying to understand and go through and run through different conversations that should happen. But please speak with vendors. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of AI either. I know there is a lot conversation in the world how bad it is, but there is in terms of legal process, legal department, this is extremely helpful, and it can solve a lot of aspects of your work. So strategy that vendors typically take is quite similar, but it is based on a lot of conversation and understanding. And once we get into possibility to speak with wider audience, then we are typically working with those teams on marketing the tool, onboarding the relevant teams, and making a smooth transition. And so that's all in terms of strategy. I just wanted everyone to understand that it's not a golden rule there. It is a fluent thing, and you should approach legal technology with that fluency. But once you enter into the space, there is an element of reward. And I think, Jeremy, I wanted you to get a few words around how do you measure the success and impact of legal tech solution that you've implemented in your organization?
Great, thanks Margo. A few things here. It all starts with sort of the golden rule. You've got to go back to your original business case. If you've got budget on the promise of being able to deliver some certain things, you start by obviously measuring that. So if your business case has been to be able to show data or to speed up velocity of contracting, you've got to be sure from the start you set up and run on the basis that you're going to be able to track that. So that's probably the obvious stuff, is using that sort of data. But I'd also say don't always get too hung up on the metrics, because the things that are easy to measure aren't always that meaningful. Simple example being, the number of contracts you push through. Well, we all know, anyone working on contracts, well, one contract you can just flick through and another one can take you days, depending on all sorts of factors, both internally and externally. So metrics aren't always, you're going to need something, you're going to need to do what you promise. If you promise to reduce legal spend, then sure, you've got to demonstrate that. But equally, feedback and engagement from stakeholders is pretty key. Things like, I tend to find anything that enables people to do things without involving legal, so any kind of self-serve or automation, I'll give you a template, those kind of things, you will get feedback from the business, engagement, positivity. So some kind of feedback survey, or just anecdotal evidence of people enjoying engaging with your tools or working more seamlessly with the team is a good pointer. Likewise, ease of use and the impact. So if the change enabled by your tool has given you more time to engage more personally with stakeholders on the bigger deals, on the more nuanced issues, then again, the feedback that you're doing more of that is an indirect but really important benefit of the tool. So I'm going to say, look, everyone talks about metrics and dashboards, and those are everything. But if you look too hard or try too hard, it might not be meaningful. It'll just be cosmetic. So I would say, and sometimes you feel a little bit inadequate speaking to a CFO, saying, well, I've got a little dashboard here, but here's some sentiment, here's some feeling. Actually, that's really important because it's across the business, it's cross-functional, and again, back to my point, it's impact outside of the legal team that business stakeholders benefit from. Taking that even further, if you're, again, it depends on the tool, but a lot of tools, if you're working with them well, they will have further reach within the business. So people will start to recognize it. I mean, I've got a lot of tools that people know the name of across the business, and logos appear on flowcharts for a procurement process or from an approval process or contracting processes. So just being known and being visible and the impact outside of legal is a powerful thing. On the downside, in some ways, after an initial sort of success of a tool, I tend to find the tool becomes invisible. You don't hear anything about it because everyone's just using it. So look carefully for benefits, because I would probably struggle. Some of the tools I'm using in such a mature fashion right now, it's quite hard to articulate because people can't remember not having it and how they manage without it. So again, it's one of those invisible ones, but it's something to articulate outside of the basic metrics. And then I go back to the point I made earlier about budget and headcount. If you can demonstrate simply that the business has been growing, never mind legal, if you've been doing more sales, the business is growing, more employees, and the legal function has stayed the same size, you can't have managed that without having scalability enabled by some sort of tool. So being able to demonstrate simply carrying on providing your same scope of services through growth with the aid of a tool, I think that in itself is a demonstration that the tool is doing what it should and that it's been successful.
And rightly pointed, it's not enough to just get the tool in, but also that process of further marketing almost of it internally is a key to success, because there may be one tool, but there might be, as in your case, probably, I don't even want to say 20 plus different tools that you utilize on a daily basis. It doesn't always fit individual. The tools typically fit. Some tools fit individual teams. Some tools are suitable for the whole company. And being aware of what's out there is the key, and it's a big part of also demonstrating that across the business. So you are doing a good job there, but are there any specific tips that you would say work really well in order to get the word around in terms of why people should use specific aspects, how to bring it to the top of their mind by simply saving it and as a star on their dashboard, or is there something else that you tend to?
I'm glad you asked, because actually I forgot to mention something on what I was talking about. That question is perfectly aimed at. And one thing I find absolutely key are integrations, because if you have the ability with whatever tool you're using to integrate, whether it's simply sending email notifications or whether it's triggering workflows, if you have a tool that integrates with other enterprise systems, then it's a massive boost to, because again, the reach increases, it becomes a key cog in wider business processes, which in turn turns legal into a sort of key value generating part of the organization. And there are a lot of tools out there, sort of simple middleware tools. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to use tools like Zapier or Power Automate or other tools like that, middleware tools that are sort of low code connectors, or if you do have the support of your IT team, then you can mess around with APIs and plug things in. But at the very basic level, the lowest common denominator will be either Slack or Teams or email. Most tools should have the ability to keep people updated on progress of, say, a contract by emailing them, Slacking them, something like that. So there's always, and likewise intake. You can take, most tools will enable you to intake through pretty much anything. I take in so much through Google Form that I can turn into any tool I'm using. So using that flexibility just gives you reach and visibility within your organization.
And on the tools, because there are so many different ones that you can choose from, we at Wolters Kluwer help with enterprise legal management. We help with contract lifecycle management, with AI contract review, and many more. But if you were an organization that is just starting with their experience, and I'm sure we have quite a few lawyers here potentially who are in that starting mode, what would you say would be a good starting point? Where would you take them on the journey with presumably some easiest sort of, but most impactful tool that you can think of? What would that be from your experience?
So I would say it starts with a mindset, and actually that's one of the things I always talk about. Legal operations isn't a function, it's a discipline that everyone in the team needs to apply. So you can't just have people doing it. You need the whole team to understand process, understand data. So that's the answer to the question. Your starting point is actually to start visualizing what you're doing as a legal team as a process, and in particular identifying what is structured data, what are data points that have got to come in a certain way that you always need. So the classic dull example of a process that nauseates everyone is an NDA request. And of course, at a very basic level, it's an email saying we need an NDA. It's an email back saying who with, so-and-so, what's the purpose, when does it start, and so on. All that kind of process can be, you can ask the same questions every time. So turn that mindset in more complex processes, I'm making it very basic, turn that mindset into actually, to get it right first time, what data do I need? And it needs to be structured data. It's either a number, a date, a name, address. These are things that are fixed. And once you've got a process that has fixed data points and then has a linear approach, here's the intake, here's the document, here's the output, you're starting to think in terms of process that then makes it very easy to translate that process into a MS form, a Google form, generating a document, sending out. So, but it all starts with that data-driven mindset. Even if on your intake is fill in a line on a spreadsheet for me, or fill in a form, or even an email template with these fields in there. I mean, that's getting looser and looser. But those are basics that anyone can apply. And even if you might get a bit of resistance to change, going back to my NDA example, sales team saying, well, I like emailing you. Yeah, but hang on, you email me, do you like getting an email back? Do you like getting another email? How about we do this here? And you'll start seeing the results. And I think if you push that, people will realize it's mutual benefit. And in the meantime, with the structured data, you've got complete rigor. You've got no duplication. The data's coming in is the data that stays all the way through and ends up getting stored at the end of the day in a contract database or whatever. So you've got purity of your data, and you're only focusing on a template. And if the template's got no moving parts, you don't need to change it. You're not even focusing on that. It's all automating through. So you're gradually reducing the moving parts, and you're locking down the key data points that makes them translatable into any other tool that you might want to use or evolve to.
Yes, and it all links to the question that is currently shared on the screen. Some examples of how legal tech has enhanced efficiency internally, also productivity for some teams or maybe wider business, or even decision making in your department. But you already shared a few examples. So if there is anything else that you want to share, that would be really welcomed, because these are the things that people tend to rely on when they use some advice. They rely on specific examples of where they can start. And I later want to ask you about your own role and how it affects the business versus no legal ops based business. But if there is any other examples that you can share, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Yeah, no, I'll give you. I've got an example that it covers lots of elements of this. So let me explain to you the process, and it covers all angles. So we have as a software company, a lot of service businesses have a clause in their contract that enables us to use our customer name and logo for publicity and commercial purposes. And some of you might know that's quite a frequently negotiated term. But we will often get our sales and marketing teams contacting legal saying, hey, we want to do a case study with X customer, can we use their logo? So great, email to legal team digs out contract. What does contract say? Answer. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Same question, end of quarter. We're really busy in sales deals, so we haven't got time for this. And it just creates time, effort, and frustration. So a classic example of a manual process. So what can we do to fix it and make it easier? The starting point here, this is not the technology point, this is a kind of legal impact point. What problem are they trying to solve? You just want to know the customer logo, right? Whether you can use it or not. Well, what do you actually need? It turns out from having this conversation and being proactive and going to sit down with the marketing team saying, what are you looking for with this? Sometimes, yes, they do need to know whether they can use a specific customer's logo. More often than not, it emerges that actually they just want to look at a load of customers in a certain business sector and see whose we can use and then decide from those which are the best ones to use. Or sometimes they just want to look at all of them that they can use and start with that. So straight away, you've got a different angle and a different mindset for what they're actually looking for. So they're actually looking for ideally a big list of all the customers they can use, even more ideally with industry sectors. So what have we got in technology that can help that? Well, sure, you could get the legal team, instead of answering the questions, to take a week out to go through all of the contracts, fill out a dashboard and put all the answers in. But actually we have data on this, right? We use Salesforce, as many people do. Salesforce has industry sectors. We have a CLM that connects with Salesforce. So actually it's quite easy for us to pull out a list of all live contracts at that given moment, who the customers are and what industry sector they're in. So that's the customers. Those are the ones that the marketing team might want to use because they're all our live customers. How do we give them the answer of whether or not they can use the logo or not? Well, we use an AI analytics tool. We use Della, which is one of the tools that Margo's organisation kindly provides to us. But using that, you can analyse all of the contracts. Let me go back a step. Using CLM, we can sift out all of the contracts that are on our standard terms. So straight away, you put those in a bucket and say, that's a yes, those are green, because our standard terms enable it. Anything that's amended or a counterparty's paper, as sifted by CLM, we push that into Della and runs through a routine over hundreds or thousands of contracts and gives you a very quick answer on a red, amber, green. Either you can't use it, amber, you can use it, but you need prior written consent, and green, it's fine, you can go ahead and use it. The contract's clear on that. So you've got all of the answers, pretty much fully automated process with a few moving parts in a dashboard that we can put on our intranet. So we push it out on. So we push this dashboard out. We've got the Google Suite, so we use a thing called a Looker dashboard, but you could do it on Power BI or SharePoint or anything like that. But it now sits on an internal web intranet page that marketing go to. So by doing it that way, we've also got the ability to push out information. What does this mean? What does written consent mean? How do you use this tool? How do we get this information? And if the customer you're looking for is not on there, here's a form you can fill in that will push it through as a legal request, because maybe we've missed some, or maybe some have got question marks by them. So you've used this whole process to create a portal where you're taking the business to instead of to legal. You're educating people on what it all means. You're showing them your workings, and you're giving them the answers they want. And it does all of that and takes it completely. So that whole work stream of request to legal has gone. The visibility I've discovered from this process, the amount of queries I got when setting it up. It's the other thing, you get visibility. Oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? You fix it, you change it. And at the end of it, I was thinking how none of these people used to come to legal at all before. So what were they doing? Were they just using logos? Were they in breach of? I don't know. But because you've brought a process into a usable format and made it visible to the business, you suddenly, as well as building the visibility of legal, you've improved risk management because people are understanding it. People know where to go. People know what not to do. So it's a great. It's a long, broad story, but you can break down any element of that into a small bit of process, a bit of data, and a bit of understanding of your sort of wider objectives and business impacts.
That's a brilliant example, and it actually touches something that I personally have been affected by, because in my previous organization, we didn't have this portal where you create requests or you know what's happening. It was all over the place. It was requests via email, annoyed lawyers who sent for the 5th or 20th time the template that I personally couldn't find across my emails. I didn't know what I was using as the final version, and it all went always muddled up. So much time wasted on my part, so much time wasted on lawyers' part, and so much frustration in the room because no one knows where things are, and handling certain aspects by email, or as you said, not handling it at all and just doing it quickly, hopefully no one noticed and risk is avoided, is not the best business approach. But that's something that most of CLM tools such as Legisway will also deliver, and it's so easy because you simply, it doesn't require any technical skills, and there is an ability also to request a contract from legal based on specific terms. So you only fill in the most important information, and legal, without a need to exchange number of emails and requests, can send you a well-prepared contract, or the ability to create a contract by yourself on the most updated form. And that all happens in that portal, in that one place that you were describing, which is just brilliant because everyone is going into the same space, everyone is working off the same hymn sheet, and it's just simplified. The number of admin taken away from legal, but also frustration from the business, is probably huge and undervalued, I would say. And that's a brilliant start and example to that you have just given. And I lived it myself, so I confirm this is absolutely life-changing for many organizations. In terms of the examples, we have been talking a lot about technology, about different tools that can help, different solutions that can help. But there is also this huge aspect of, great, we select technology, we have vendors to help us implement it potentially, or we have someone internally to help us implement it potentially. But how about putting it all together under one roof? Because there is always this concern of lawyers, okay, it's all going to be on my shoulder. I have to find a vendor. I have to learn how to use the tool. I have to properly also introduce it to the business, maybe with help or without help of a vendor, not even mentioning getting a budget. That's too much time. And you are in the legal operations space as the legal operations director. How do you think, and would you recommend, I'm sure you would, recommend this to everyone on the call who do not have in their team legal operations individual to help out with that, but how do you go about introducing such role that helps out with helping to bring implementation? Because again, that's another headcount that I'm thinking of, but how this could smooth internally the whole process of change, digitalization, implementation of tech. What's the best advice you can give?
Thanks, Margo. You asked me the really easy questions. But so well, it starts simple, and it starts almost going back to what I last said. With just using it as a discipline, you don't need a legal ops team. You can start to build process improvement, understand data, understand optimizing processes, and getting the best out of the tools you've got. That doesn't require much change management. The tools are there. You might need to create a bit of bandwidth, but it's critical bandwidth. I think going further than that and justifying headcount or consultancy or whatever it is, usually, in a way, usually the business case comes from scaling. It's all about scale. I think if you're a business that's staying the same size or not doing anything, well, there aren't many of those, right? But if you need to scale, the joy of having a focus and the freedom I have in legal ops mine is a proactive role where I'm actually out there looking for risks, looking for issues, looking for what's going to happen in the future, and building very early on systems and structures that you know are going to be scalable as you grow. And just by keeping these disciplines of data and process, that enables that. So I think any any team, for example, you'll get in companies that are growing, you have finance ops, you have people ops. So you have people within a function whose focus isn't to deliver that function, but to enable that function, provide the infrastructure for that function, manage that function. So at a certain stage of growth, I don't actually think it's when you're talking to, I don't know, senior stakeholders, actually that role is less, I find less hard to justify than another lawyer, because another lawyer is just going to create their own set of demands. You add another lawyer to a team, you can be sure their inbox will be full and their workload will be full within a week. Your job is not to make that happen. My role is to make sure that I am measured on 2 lines on a graph. One is the growth of the business and the other is the growth of the legal team. And I've got to keep that gap as wide as I can through this dedicated role. So if you look at the gap, which I had a slide with a graph on, and the amount of cost in the middle of that gap, it's pretty compelling for any CFO or CEO to know that over time the benefit's just going to be scalable and exponential.
Brilliant. And with that question, it brings us to the end of our webinar today. So as a summary and conclusion, I'm not going to read them out all, but you all receive a presentation from today's session, including the access to this full statistics. But it's very important to understand, first of all, how to gain the budget and how to approach the business and help them understand that this is not just another batch of money that I require. It is life-changing for the business. It is changing for the finances of the business, but it's also changing for the way people in the business work, and takes away potentially quite a lot of frustration, not from the lawyers itself, but also from other business stakeholders. And that's important because it does touch them personally. And if it does, they will realize the potential that such tools and legal department can change the whole business and how impactful it can be for them as well. So looking into that and looking to some other examples of seeking support from vendors, seeking support from potentially and building legal ops function could be also another solution for you to go for. But as a also, I'm just gonna check some questions if we have any. Please, if you have any questions before you leave them in the question section. But I've got one question here, because we constantly talked about technology, but we didn't touch much, and also about legal ops, but we didn't touch much about people's aspect, people in the business, the mentality, and the change management, which is big. So I roughly understand the question. So in terms of change management, Jeremy, this is not just the legal teams that have to change. This is the business that have to change. So I'm gonna give you that question in a second, but I wanted also to give my perspective first, because often I see lawyers who are decision makers often in their team, but they are often coming with an impression, at least to calls about legal technology, with an impression that they are not prepared to change much. They are not prepared to change the way they work because they are happy with the emails, with the exchange of information that previously happened in the business. How would you say this can be impacted? Because they seem to want to change something, but they don't want to get full on. They feel they should change, but actually they don't want to do so. What would be the advice from you to lawyers who have this mentality, or on the other hand, to business itself that sees legal as just another small part of the business? How would you influence the change management aspects, the way people think about technology and approach change? It's not an easy question because it's diving deeply into psychology of everyone. We have deep-rooted aspects in us that tell us don't change because there is high risk associated with it. But what would you say? Is it worth it? What's the approach that you would give?
Well, I think it's recognizing, to start with, actually, it's not just lawyers, right? People generally aren't comfortable with change. If we're honest with ourselves, none of us are that comfortable with doing something differently, getting out the different side of bed. So accept that. It's a challenge. For lawyers, the problem is it's not just lawyers, but the lawyers have a big problem in that the DNA of every lawyer, in-house or not, comes from private practice. Private practice, you're trained, educated, inducted. It's instilled in you the process of generating demand. How are you? I'm busy. How are things? Great. I'm really busy. I want to be busy. My inbox is busy. Your whole job is to generate demand for your time because you sell your time. And that mindset is so embedded that even when people come out of private practice into in-house legal, they're most comfortable when they've got a busy inbox and they're responding. People want me, I'm replying. You've got to recognize that that is not going to work in-house. In a way, that should be part of a key part of recruitment process for in-house, is getting people to understand it or recognize it, even to say, yeah, I'm like that, but I want to change. If you are going to keep that demand mindset, then it's not sustainable in-house, and you will just end up, frankly, burning yourself out and burning everyone else out around you. So that's my starting point. Get that and recognize that. On the change management piece more generally from a business perspective, a lot of it comes down to, dull thing to say, communication, but actually making sure the people who need to know are aware of the compelling need to do something. You know, if we don't do this, I know it's changed, we don't do this, we're going to fall over because we're going to have no more headcount, so we've got to do this. Or we're growing as a business, we can't scale unless we do this. So we've got to be clear and upfront about the compelling need to justify the change. The second thing is you've got to control and manage the change. So what you should be doing ideally with a good tech implementation is minimizing the change, because if you've got a process in place that's manual, pushing that into automating a process, if you've done the process bit first, isn't such a change. In fact, the change is a positive one because you're getting the tool to do the heavy lifting, but also you want a tool that gives you a good user experience, it's got a good interface. It isn't too much of a leap. If you give someone a tool and it's rocket science to use it, then they can't be blamed for not using it. And then thirdly and finally is what I call hypercare. Every time you set in place a change, you've got to be really on your toes and we do it as legal ops. The moment we change something, Slack channel open, the moment somebody says, how do you do this again? You're right on it, and you're giving them no excuse to say this isn't working. You're being really responsive and making it succeed through your support.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you all for attending today and listening to our presentation. There are no more questions that we can ask due to time constraints, but if there is anything that you wish to leave us with following this session, please get in touch either via LinkedIn, via email, or through Lexology. All the best, keep well, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone.